welcome everybody to another Energy Geek Speak with Christine Marguerite, myself, and loveveolvenergy. Today is an interesting session, but first I want to tell you about an upcoming series I have in early 2021, New Moon Revivification. It's a group energy session. You can find out more about that on the link below. But today, what I'm offering here is a conversation that I have had with my friend Rachel of rachelanneenergy. And her link is below as well. Please join us as we talk about dragons, Draconian energy, and Elohim. Very cool. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts about
I just
Elohim and
so struck that part that we discussed about the purity, about how it's so finely distilled. It's like the heaviest, purest possible form of whichever Elohim is coming forward. Like I think I've only had personal interactions with, I got like a justice feeling, like divine justice, obviously not human justice, but it's like a divine justice. And then the one that came through when you and I were reading each other last summer about hope.
yes,
that one was very big. And I feel like as I get through more and more of the debris in my own field, that's when they show up the most. When you get through
interesting
distractions, when you
Mm-hmm.
get through the things that are there distracting you energetically or vying for your attention, when you keep clearing and keep healing and keep redirecting your attention, it feels like that's when it comes for me. This is how I'm experiencing it. This is when it comes forward in a more clear way, in a more impactful way. I would even say startling in a positive way. Like I was not prepared for like the profundity, it is deep energy. And I still get off on that. Don't get off on that.
Girl, you and I rolling in the deep on
girl,
a rag.
rolling in the deep.
Amen. I love it.
Yeah, it's maybe it's you do healing on yourself and whatnot, move through what's there for you to move through, but it also feels as you realign your priorities, what you're going to give your energy to, what you're going to give your focus to, the more you distill what you're going to be focused on and what you're here to do, it feels like that's when they start coming forward. That's how I'm experiencing. That's when they start coming forward more and more and more, because it's been almost like a blitz since like September of last year for me. Like they're just popping up all the time.
Really?
Yeah.
And you feel, I have so many questions, so I'm just going to keep shooting questions and we can just jam back and forth.
Sure.
Recognizable as Elohim from the get-go, or from the get-go, as in it was an introduction a year and a half ago or whatever.
Yeah, right. So I have all the clairs in varying degrees, and the first contact was seeing the word.
Okay.
I would get the word in meditation. I'm like, okay, so is that Hebrew? What is that? What is Elohim? Not something ever ran into during Catholic catechism,
Great. Yes.
So it was the word was introduced, and then that, like, I don't know, setting the stage, building the awareness, because then I would start to see it in internet articles, other spiritual pages. You know how spirit do, like who
Yeah.
watch us set the stage.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's my first inkling was seeing the word over and over in meditation. Elohim, Elohim, Elohim.
It's so interesting. You know, I wonder about our group here, our Evolve in Love group, and um, how I was inspired to collect this just specific group of women,
Mhm.
and just how this energy that we're pointing at, and we're using the word Elohim to point at it, there's it's kind of a surprise to me that that's the thread. Because when I began all this, aware, but you know, energy geek here, right? And so it could be anything. And there's just something about depth, multidimensionality, and energy that's the theme for all of us.
Mhm.
So I'm so curious about, I have so many questions because when you were asking me about stuff, and I was like, well, let's chat about it and see where we can jam and what can come up around it. From it's partly my experience weaved in with research and things I've read and things I've looked about. So, of course, speaking with you, I want to know where what your beliefs and experiences are with the dragons and draconian energy and elemental energy and Elohim
Mhm.
energy.
Mhm.
And in one of the lives that I did that you commented on, I was talking about divine feminine and Dakini energy
Mhm.
as well.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about that, and just like what lights up for you.
Mhm.
Ex-
Elemental for sure,
yes,
for
like
sure.
for me, that's the
Insane
root
resonance.
theme.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Insane
um
resonance. And it seems like I've had that connection since my abilities opened, because the first
yes.
guide I ever met was a dragon.
So
Like
did
we're
the
not
guy, so was that before the mediumship stuff really started to come online for you?
mm, no. So like the first beings that I spoke to were um Gabriel and
Okay.
Metatron and Michael. And then like my grandmother who died before I was born, and so I had like the mediumship.
Yeah.
But then and this was before the Lightworkers Lab, so I didn't have any training.
Yes.
And so I'm
Yep.
sort of stumbling through this, like, okay, what the hell is going on? And I would see posts about people talking, well, I was talking to my spirit guides, and I'm like, what the hell is a spirit guide? Do you have to be Native American to have a spirit guide? How does this work?
Yeah.
So, I had already been meditating at that point and doing yoga for several years before all this. So I knew how to meditate, or at least my version of meditation.
Yes.
I knew how to do that. And so when I would have no roommates at home, I would make the house as quiet as possible, and I would see who can I talk to, like who's around. And the first guide to step forward that wasn't an archangel or one of my past relatives was a dragon. And I was like, you got to be effing kidding me. Dragons are real.
And just like boom, full on.
And so, yeah. And so she's been with me through all of it.
Yeah.
And so I just have this tie to the elementals, and that energy pulls at me because of, like we said, the depth of it,
Yeah.
the purity of it. And it does not run from darkness. It's very intimate with the darkness. It is not darkness, but it does not, I don't even know how to verbalize. Like the dragons can get into low vibe places if they have to
While still
transmute.
maintaining.
Yes, while
Yes.
maintaining their
Light
dimensionality
connected.
and their
Yes.
vibration. Um, and something about that, even that ability feels very elemental to me. It's very deep. It's very primordial, I think is the word that you used, and that fits so well. It is beyond time. It is beyond imagining. It is this potent, profound, like all the words fail.
Yeah.
It is the energies of creation. It is the energies of the universe at their most infinite, at their most
Ah.
both big and small, at the most infinitesimal, at the most titanic. There's something I do not know how to
Here,
verbalize,
I concur.
but it
So
stirs
yeah,
me so deeply, and I connect with it.
yes, yes. Mother of Dragons, welcome. Yes. So I'm really curious about my understanding, and I'm wondering if that resonates with you, this, what I painted as a kind of lineage. And what I mean is that from unmanifest to very manifest. Gaseous state to solid state. And so I started with the Elo, and then Dragon, and then Dakini, and then the Davic realms and elementos. I need an elemento right now. Elementals and Gaia. And so that was my density to less dense, and I called it a lineage. And I think particularly I called it a lineage because I was pointing at a kind of living consciousness vibration. Did that lineage make sense to you? And where do you where do you fit or move the archangelic into that? Where do they sit? I guess I'm really interested. I like the details, and I like the unraveling of knots, and wanting to understand, and maps and things like that. And so I think partly what I'm asking and wanting to explore with you is mapping these unmappables.
Now, I will say that I have not studied like cherubim, seraphim, the levels of the angelic at all. But I feel like, and I feel even, obviously if there's levels of angels, then there's differences there. But it feels like the angels were created to do a job, whatever that job may be. So task oriented. Doesn't mean they're not advanced, doesn't mean they're not extraordinarily high vibe. But they were created as soldiers, so to speak. You do the work of divine, and that is what you do. And you do. I feel like the Elohim is not as much about doing as being.
I concur.
It's
Yes.
a deeper consciousness. It is a deeper consciousness. And it's almost like the Elohim were the colors of the palette with which Creator created.
Yes. I have a similar understanding and belief system with feels. All of that.
Yes,
that's how it feels to me. And sometimes I'm not sure if that's my training, my subconscious understanding of how within Judeo-Christian traditions they talk about the creation myths. And there's mythos of creation in every tradition for sure. It always starts with the foundational building blocks of things, and that's how it. And so I'm not sure how much of that is accurate perception from a more untainted, uncolored place, and how much of it is learned and me regurgitating a belief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's both and instead of or.
But I mean, maybe there's value in the pondering.
For sure. For sure.
Just value in the
Just
pondering.
just keeping it real with that is really
Perspective.
I mean, hello. Right? Coffee. I'm just saying, I pick my nose too. So whatever. Hold on one second. I have to. No, that's okay. I keep hearing things move over there. So I just needed to check. So interesting to me because over the last year, I mean, 2020 has been what it's been. And so a lot of my exploration has taken place over the course of 2020. And so that has its influences as well. There's a point I've been looking through a lot of the things that I was writing and thinking about and offering and sharing. And this one thing that I said caught me because I'm not sure I agree with it anymore. That in trying to explain it, I would do this movement through my body, right? Like it would be like, how do there's so many different ways to describe what that is. And so it would be just the initial emanation from the Big Bang, say, right?
Yeah.
Like, and what is that?
Forth. Yeah.
And this belief was that initial was archangelic, or that's what I've been taught. And I'm not, and so what I would say was from the archangelic, as that archangelic exhaled, the Elohim were born. I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure. It just, because we're talking about, it's interesting because when I start to think about the archangelic, you get more kind of emotionality, personalities. One carries the feeling of emotions and water and flow, and the other more protective and righteousness and et cetera, et cetera. There's something about the Elohim that feels like it comes before that.
Mm-hmm.
It comes before something even graspable as a consciousness. It's almost like our teacher Crystal talks about sometimes, on the roof of existence, the 18th, 19th, and 20th dimensions, and then you sit on the roof and then you launch. And so I feel like if the moon roof was open on that roof, from there come the elementals, is what it kind of feels like. And so for us to even kind of like talk about it, in a way, it doesn't make sense. And
exactly.
Right? All we have are these 5 senses, or 6 or 7, depending on what your belief system is. Sure. And that's how we interpret everything that lands on our sensitive being, right? That's how we sense existence.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if we would need an extra sensory function to really, so I would grow like a magic horn, and that would have like a sensitivity that could understand what that's what it feels like. It's barely
unicorn.
Right? Unicorn.
The unicorn. No, I agree with that. I agree, because it feels like angelic energy is interpretive, whereas Elohim energy is gnosis. It's the deepest gnosis. You don't interpret anything. It is.
Tis. Beginning, middle, end.
You don't have to say, oh, that feels like. There's no argument when you feel it. You're like, oh, it is. Mm-hmm.
And so I feel, based on this, can I keep going, or do you want to?
Yeah.
Based on this, and what we're already talking about, is there are different maps to understand this concept, and one deals with archetypes and emotionalities and beingness, and it looks more like an angelic realm. And in that there are 12 and they have names, and that's very Elizabeth Clare Prophet and all the work that she had done, et cetera, et cetera. And for a while I was unpacking that stuff because I was bothered by some of these very Western sounding, old school Piscean era, greater than, less than, power struggle words to describe this thing that felt more elemental. And so when I put it into the context of 7 elements, which it feels like, or directions is what I would call it, what we're talking about, the 4 directions, the 4 basic elements, above space, below space, inner space. And each of those, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, I just want to make sure I was saying 7. Has an element associated with it. But then we have to start talking about combinations of elements, right? And this is where, okay, so all of that I just said, elements, combinations of elements, water, heat equals mist, for example. Is that an element? I don't know. I feel like if I'm talking about elements like that, I'm talking about the realm of dragons. And I feel like the dragon energy was the first to emerge from Elohim.
Okay. Okay.
How does that feel?
Wow.
So from that, so let's talk about that.
Ooh.
And the layer I would put on top of that would be Dakini, or a host of other things. Dakini has more, it has a gender, it has a duality. It has an they're more archetypal. Not that dragons aren't, but however, a more primordial archetype. So you were having ahas. I want to hear about what just happened.
That was the fastest integration I think I've ever experienced in my whole life. Like a blam. I see where she's going. No, I got it. And I could see it, like it was unraveling in my mind, and I could like see that being the case. So
well, I don't want to.
Yeah, I think it's entirely valid theory. I think it makes a lot of sense, to be honest with you, knowing my experience of the dragons being what it is.
What do you think the relationship is then? What is your first person experience about how they relate, if at all?
Okay.
Or if you want to bring in your dragon and maybe ask.
Yeah, do you guys have anything to say about this? Like, Raiha, like come on, girl, if you got something to say, say it. It makes sense to me because I do have a dragon guide that I work with. He, to me, seems like the personification of the word Leviathan. Like, he is older than the earth, is how he feels when I experience him. And I call him Crag the Rock Biter because he looks like he's made out of rocks. And he's so large that I cannot, in terms of scale, he's never been able to show me in terms of scale. One, because, you know, he's energy. He's not a physical being. But like, even if you were, you know, like he's still, I'm so big, I can't even show you how big I am. It wouldn't make sense to you, kind of thing. But the ancientness of him and the deep power is very, very much what I would correlate to Elohim energy with him. So you saying dragons being born of that makes sense to me, having experienced him in the way that I do. It's almost like he knows the secrets of God, you know, like he is the secret keeper of God.
I love that.
So that makes a tremendous amount of sense to me. And just like the simplicity of his energy Does that make sense? Like he is an
Yes.
ascended being, and yet there is such simplicity in his beingness. When you're in his presence, in his energetic signature, there's no chatter, there's no distraction, there's nothing going on but him. And that's how I experienced the Elohim. There is nothing in that energy but it.
But
It is so,
it.
yes, it is just that pure. So I think that makes a tremendous amount of sense. And
Yeah. And I know there's a lot of different kinds of dragon and draconian energy, and
yes,
it
but that's how, yeah, that's how it all started. Yeah, I think, yeah. They've
really
evolved,
beautiful.
yeah, they've evolved like everybody else has had to evolve, you know, because it's an ongoing experiment, and nobody had all the answers, and that's why maybe that's why it keeps going. But um yeah, that being the
It's
initial, that makes sense, and then them having to evolve the way they needed to in order to fulfill the will and pleasure of source makes sense to me.
um the so the way I'm languaging it, it's as if the Elohim are the whisper, and the draconian energy is the keeper of the whisper, the keeper of the secret.
They
Maybe
hold.
that's true. The holding, which would mean, of course, they have to morph. I was going to ask you something else around that. I can't remember what it is right now. But
And
I
it would make
see you.
sense to how they
Yeah,
can insert that into the situation as needed.
as needed. So we're speaking about these prime energies and um, whispers and secrets as foundation.
Hmm.
We think of whispered secrets as ephemeral and barely real. And yet, I think both of us experience and have a gnosis, and a knowing that it is foundation.
Mm.
And when we think foundation, we have the word elements, the basic building blocks of our touchable, smellable, seeable, tasteable reality marching around a planet, which is knowable through our sense gates.
Hmm.
And it seems like there's an obvious connection to me that but let's unpack that a bit, right? In the lineage I was describing, it was from there, and we're just going to let the Dakinis be in the fourth dimension
Okay.
for a minute, and then move to our Davic realms and
Okay.
Gaia. And I feel like I really want to explore and unpack that connection there, because we're talking about building blocks, we're talking about elements, we have elementals, and we have the Davic realm and the fairy realms and gnome realms and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I know that's a map. It just feels like we're talking about building blocks, more dense when it comes to the elementals, and what we're calling the consciousness of the earth as Gaia, as the level of angelic presence, and is sometimes called angelic presence in terms of mission, purpose and mission. I just threw a whole bunch of stuff out there. I don't know how to organize it exactly, and I'm wondering what's landing and connecting for you.
Mm.
If anything.
I feel my wheels turning, and
Yeah.
wanting to sort it all out and create that map like you were talking about. And it's interesting to me because I feel like the dragons are able to be of it and in it, and yet not.
Uh-huh.
Like they are able to pop out of that at any time.
Out of what?
Out of how to language. Y'all did not give me the words. How to say it?
Duality, manifest reality, perceivable existence.
It's like the dragons have the ability to be whatever is needed, however it's needed. It's like, yes, elemental, and yet almost like that James Bond license to so we need you to do this. All right, you know,
This is how it gets done.
yeah.
Yes.
So we don't have a guy who does this. Guess what? You're the guy who does this now. You know, and so I feel like they're almost chameleons, you know, like able to do whatever it is that needs to be done. Whereas many of the other elementals were given their mission, and that is what they do. The gnomes know how to be gnomes, and that's all they do is be gnomes. And the fairies do what the fairies do, and they're just fairy. Not just, but they're fairies. But the dragons, hey, we got a special mission. Hey, we don't have a guy who does this. Hey, there's an energy that, you know what I mean? It feels
Yep.
it feels more like they are able to pop in and out of whatever their role is that they're currently doing to do something else if needed.
If needed.
Mm-hmm.
So then what's their relationship with the elemental realms?
The first thing I hear is caretaker.
Uh-huh.
I heard in it, but not of it.
Mm-hmm.
I hear divine will and pleasure. So that could be anything. And, you know, Diana, what's her name? Diana Cooper
Mm-hmm.
has done a lot of that channeling where she's communicated with how they've evolved, you know, and it's not just that they were once animals upon the earth that ascended. It's also that they've become other. Where do you get a source dragon from?
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't say what a source dragon does,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So it just feels like almost like they have their own. I don't want to say subgrouping because that sounds biological, but
It's okay. It's the tools we have. So
thank you, limited English. You know, like they were drippings from the Elohim, and then they just became something else because it was needed.
Because it was needed. Because that was needed.
Yeah, like made with you know, if we're going with that metaphor of the Elohim being paint with which Creator created, you know, they were drips of Elohim paint, and because that is uncontainable and limitless, then so too the dragons are uncontainable and limitless.
Do you feel that each dragon or dragon group is related to a knowable element? Water, air, earth, etc., etc.? You don't?
No. I feel like it may have started out that way, but I feel like because of the evolution and what was needed, I feel like some of them have gone in a whole different direction and are not made of any element other than the ether. So I guess technically that would be an element. It's just that I don't think of the ether as water, you know, as
Yeah.
something that you can hold, you can feel the air, you can hold earth, you can hold water, you can hold fire if you're that brave. Um, but you can't hold the ether.
No, it is.
So yeah,
Yeah.
it is. So we're back to it is.
Mhm.
So, you know, God, this is fascinating.
It's just really, I love talking about that untalkable about. I love gazing upon that which is ungazable upon. And I feel like that's where we're poking around a little
Mhm,
bit.
mhm.
And it makes it understandable and interesting to me. And there's some things that uh, I don't know where I land. I don't know where I sit with the idea of each Elo also having a name and an emotional quality.
Right.
Although that does lend itself to reflecting on Draconian energy. Does it make sense if I use that word to describe Draconian for you? For the Draconian energy to go where needed, to splinter off into something atmospheric that is just a vibration that feels like joy and variations on joy, say, rather than a vibration that feels like mist.
Yeah.
I don't know much about it. I know you're the mother of dragons. So
I mean, I can only say I've only been doing this for like 3 years now. So I don't have the decades, the decades of devotion. Talk to me again when I'm 70. But
all right, I will. If I'm still alive, yeah, I will. Or even if I'm not alive, I'll come to you and I'll ask you what you're thinking.
but I mean, something that has, like you were saying, the vibration of joy, and that can be degrees or measurements, I guess, for lack of a better word. But it makes sense to me that some elements are not the physical elements that we think of as making up matter on the earth. There are,
Yes,
and that would be the Elohim, like we were talking about, that
another map of
found,
it.
distilled, titrated. I mean, like before there was light, there was this, you know, that creation before creation energy. And so it makes sense to me by the feel of it, by that gnosis, my humicorn, totally gets that there would be an element of joy. There would be an element of hope. There would be an element of justice. You know, these kinds of qualities that can exist far beyond our human understanding. There can be a greater sense of it somewhere.
Yes, and great. Yes,
than what we can bring in,
or even know.
Right. Right.
Even possibly conceive.
Right. And that's what the Elohim feel like to me.
That's what feels like to you?
That's what it feels like to me.
So I wonder about that too. And I believe in a kind of splintering and a kind of once this and then this splintering out. And I wonder about the first rays. And I wonder if the first rays have more of this numinous, almost unknowable and vibration that we would call more of an emotion, or this numinous, unknowable vibration that we would call, ooh, that's earth energy. In a way, I feel like any emotional map you have, underpinning it, and if you go to Tibetan Buddhism and anybody who's working with Dakinis, any emotion you have has a quality of air, earth, fire, water, or ether. that its anger would be heat.
Mm-hmm.
Tears, kinds of tears, are hot. They have water and fire. Does that
Right.
make sense?
Right.
Or
Mm-hmm.
sadness, that any emotionality has an elemental under it.
Okay.
Not that I'm forcing it into that. I'm mostly just musing right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And poking around.
Entertaining. Yeah, absolutely.
I wonder about that. I don't know that I will ever know.
Yeah.
For sure, in particular. Although I do believe there's a place to know it. And so I take that back. I think there's some point, perhaps you and I will be on retreat and we'll bump into these truths. And then we'll come back out and I'll become Christine and you'll become Rachel and we'll have an English language conversation about those numinous things we just bumped into. Hey, did you bump into blah, 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 blah?
I did, and I can't talk about it.
Can't talk about it. My God. That's kind of the truth of it, though. You know, that's kind of the truth of it. Curious stuff.
That's like trying to talk about a gnosis with words. I mean, that it is.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll know it when you gnosis it, you will know it.
For sure.
And yeah. And that feeling speaks so much more than any other, I don't know. There again, the words fail. Any other conceptualizing of it, any sort of communication about it, it's like, where do you even start? Because you can't capture something like that.
Agreed. And a little bit disagreed. I don't disagree with that touching it.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't disagree. Apologies. I believe, I want this to be true as we move into the Aquarian era, where our DNA is reconfiguring and we're becoming other than what we've always known ourselves to be. That languaging things begins to draw down into our DNA, into our mind and our nervous system, so that famously in Zen Buddhism, they always make the metaphor of pointing at the moon, and don't mistake your pointing at the moon for the moon itself. And so languaging is pointing at this unknowable thing,
right?
That is purely just on the fringe edge of experience. And perhaps there's a significance and an importance for us to have a conversation now, and to be at least to at least point at things. And perhaps as we move in years and years and years from now, decades, centuries from now, there is a language, and it is more knowable, graspable. GNO-able. It's knowable, as in gnosis knowable.
Yeah.
I think it's important. I think it's that's what I want to be true. To make attempts with languaging and words, and so that others like you and I, unless we started talking about stuff, how would we ever know that we needed to have this conversation? Right? And we're not the only ones here. I'm sure of that. At least that.
Wow.
How are you doing over there?
I feel very expanded.
Do you know?
my limited vocabulary, and yet
Mabel had a bail on you, I see.
She was like, it's way too high vibe in here.
We're not, I can't do.
You and your spiritual stuff. Just want to go outside.
Leave me alone already. Yeah. I feel all the connections with all of that. And I feel, I'll add, I don't know. I had made some promises to the public a couple of months ago that I wasn't able to make good on as yet, because my life did whatever it needed to do, and perhaps I'll make good on those pretty soon. One of those promises was unpacking how we're unpacking right now, and for me to really focus on Dakini energy, being sky dancers, fourth dimensional and up, have only because they carry within them as a consciousness duality in extreme, wrathful, blissful, a wrathful or wisdom based, and perhaps them as consciousnesses. I don't know what to say about them. Except that a lot of people have taken those archetypes, the Dakini archetypes, the truth of the Dakini, as we do in the West, we appropriate these wisdom traditions and we turn them into our wisdom tradition, which is psychology. And so they use these archetypes in psychology, and they lose some of their sacredness and their holiness. I don't know that they lose their power, because people, and I'll just leave this general without telling stories, people have experienced them in profound, sometimes supremely uncomfortable ways, not knowing what they were touching into. And so touching into it, not coming to it with purity of heart, as you speak about. And so maybe that's what I'm heading towards now. Purity of heart, not manipulating, not doing, magic hocus pocus things with this sacred beingness. They definitely, although each Dakini is associated with a color and an element, they are associated with emotions, mental states, and the emotional states that go along with the mental state, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that to me feels so much more human, or at least mammalian, or animal, specific to any incarnated living thing that functions primarily on a mental, emotional, nervous system. And it feels like to me that the Dakinis have a strong resonance with that. I don't know what more to say about that, except that I mostly just wanted to bring it up. A lot of how people use it, and perhaps there's a lot of people how people will appropriate and use that for Western psychology, or what we in the West will call Eastern psychology, is to look at how you yourself are manifesting in Dakini fashion. Or what are you manifesting? A mental, emotional state of a wrathful fire Dakini. For example, right? That would be destructive rage, destructive passion in some way, as opposed to creative passion, creative fire in some way. And to me, while that that feels less building block to me, uh, and feels more specific to a human nervous system.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
maybe our the other animals we share the planet with are I don't know this to be true, but it feels true to me, are less, they have different kinds of nervous systems.
Mhm.
And perhaps they are less aligned with a Dakini kind of energy and more aligned with an elemental dragon Elohim. They're more uh, that's my feelings and that's my ponderings on that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not particularly a Dakini scholar
Right.
with a PhD in it, so I can't speak from that place. I can just speak from gleanings and readings and mm, my experiences and sort of the cautions that have been offered to me about when you do Dakini work and when you don't.
Ah.
Am I would I be willing to really look at the emotional expressions in a human nervous system, positive and negative, duality nature, sprung from elemental sources? How does that manifest in my psychology? And am I willing to come to terms with that? Not necessarily changing it, but perhaps finding balance and acceptance.
Yeah. That feels very adept. Not to pass a judgment on it, but that feels like a very valid and adept association that you've made. And like it
Mm.
points to both the simplicity and the sophistication of our creation,
Hmm.
of our existence and our
Hmm.
experience. So I would call that very adept, honestly.
Well, thanks for your support. I appreciate that.
Not that you need my permission to have this opinion, but let me tell you what I think about it.
Well, I love that. I mean, there's a part of just finding like-minded community, and we offer up stuff and to get feedback. Because I'm just as open to hear, meh, yeah, no, I don't think so. Christine, yeah, it's got reach there, girl. That's a reach. So that's not what I heard from you. So thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for sharing that. I feel expanded. I feel like I learned something. Come away
So
with a different view.
why do you think it's important to look at these foundational building blocks of the Elo and Dragon, the Elohim, the Draconian energies? What's the significance, the importance? I have a cardinal that just landed with his little tuft up right outside my window.
Awesome. Um, I think we've spent too much time as a human race. We've spent too much time with a very narrow focus. And if this is the age of Aquarius and we're out to evolve and become more of what we were at one time, if we're talking about Lemuria and Atlantis and things like that, and what our star families that are
Ooh.
supporting us have evolved to be, then I feel like those energies push us to become more focused on the universe and not just on the top of the planet Earth that we've sectioned out arbitrarily. You know what I mean?
I
It's been
do.
a very, very narrow focus of life, of creation. And we can't even agree that there was creation. Um, and I feel like the dragons show us that there is so much more going on and that we are a part of so much more. And they bring that expanded world, universe, existence, creation view. You just keep zooming out, and maybe that's part of our evolution too, is to refocus and not be so narrow. um And if we expand in that way, where else will we expand to? Maybe it becomes a completely different experiment. If we can just get off of our narrow focus, of our silo vision. This is my life on planet Earth as I know it. Well, honey, there's a whole lot more going on, even just on Earth. Not to mention that there's so much going on. There are other universes. And we're not even talking about that because we can't even agree what's going on in this universe. So I feel like they remind us that this, you guys, humans, y'all are not the end all be all. Guys, zoom out.
So an opportunity to zoom out.
Yeah.
And what does that do for humans on an individual basis? I imagine that there's a lot more peace and ease.
Yes. I think it shows us we're definitely not allowing that. And if we could, would we? Or do we just like making things hard for ourselves? But yeah, I think peace and ease. I think it shows us where we could have gone, other than, where we took that left turn and this is where we ended up. Well, what was the other option? And do we have that option now? Or what is the option now? And can we explore that? And what would that be like? Has everybody had enough of poverty and war and sickness? Can we experience something else for a little while? And then I just feel like they give us growing up in the Catholic Church, they always wanted to tell me how precious I was to Jesus and how much God loved me and how I matter and all this kind of stuff. And then when you get into your teens and your early 20s, you find out life doesn't always feel like that. There's kind of a lot going on and everybody's worried about themselves and stuff. But I feel like, from my experience with the dragons, they can help us feel that quality of being precious and loved. And yes, you do matter. And yes, all this other stuff is going on, but you still matter over here. So can you feel loved? Can you feel precious? Can you see that truth? And can you also at the same time entertain that you are not the only thing that's going on in this universe?
Yes.
The other ones. So I feel like they do the little and they do the big. If that makes sense.
That totally makes sense.
They're doing the little for us to feel like we matter as creations of God. And they're also showing us that this is not all God has created.
Do you think that's part of their, I don't want to use the word mission, but I'm going to use it, like part of just their function? The
Maybe.
Zoom in, zoom out?
Maybe. It seems like they're a lot better at paying attention to what needs paying attention to in the moment. What is needed? What is needed right now? Do you need to be focused on your tennis shoes or do you need to be focused on the state of whatever?
You had mentioned that before, alignment with a priority. What is actually important?
What is
here?
needed? It reminds me of what Lauren says. What is needed in the moment?
Yeah.
What is needed in the moment? And I feel like that's what the dragons fulfill.
That feels true. That feels true. Allows that, oh, that's so gorgeous, isn't it? It's a very different lens. It's a different lens from an Elo. It's a different lens from a Dakini. That's a very different lens from an elemental, including Gaia. That's a different lens.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of offerings, what do you have coming down in terms of doing dragon readings to dragon classes or group readings, or how does that, your work with that level of consciousness and those being essences, how does that manifest for you in terms of your work on the planet?
That is an excellent question. I look forward to that unfolding of the work that I have been doing since like fall-ish is like primer on dragons, and it's definitely not as expanded as what we've been talking about today. It's more of a, I'm new here, and why do we think dragons are, like, why are you guys talking about dragons? I thought that was a fairy tale kind of thing. Well, it's not a fairy tale. Surprise. So I go through the elemental dragons, the air, earth, water, fire, and then what I call the ether dragons. And I linked it back to the astrology of each. Here are the air sign. If you're an air sign, you probably have one of these dragons, and so on and so forth. And then most of it is channeled. They did help me write pretty much the entire thing. And there were a couple of questions that, I thought, okay, so if I didn't know anything about dragons, what kind of questions would I have? And it's like, how are dragons different from other kinds of spirit guides? What did the dragons wish we knew about them? That kind of thing. And they have interesting things to say to us. They're so wise, and they're so smart, and such a good sense of humor, and a little bit of a smart ass. And that's why I love them. They are my they are my tribe.
Yes.
I do dumb things, and I can just feel them going.
Really? Really?
We're gonna try at that, or and they asked me to do this class, and so I'm going to offer that as soon as I get like the production outline written out, so that it's presented in a way that makes sense, and that the information can be understandable and not just all over the place, because the way that it came in channeled is all over the place. So I have that, and offering dragon guide readings, and I've just been kind of chicken about it. I've just been kind of nervous to get up and start doing that, but I was thinking of going up in the lab light room maybe and practicing a couple of times.
Okay.
Just get a feel for how it goes. How is the information going to come through? What is going, like garden variety, what are you guys going to offer, kind of thing, knowing that anything could come out at any time. So those are the two main things that have been on my plate where the dragons are concerned. This like brings so much other like dimensionality. So many other directions to go into. So I'm curious to see what ideas pop up around this conversation. And because I know they're here and they're listening, and they're going to be like, so how about
now that we got you here, what do you think about
like Christine, like she's okay. She lit a fire under your ass, didn't she?
Or they lit a fire under my ass.
Yeah. Like, we were hoping you guys would get here. So we'll have to see what comes out of this conversation. Like I can feel some very esoteric and high level things coming out, and then like how would that translate again to people who are new at this and want to understand and want to get on the Draconian board, so to speak. And then there's differences in how they're perceived, because in the witchcraft culture, they do not talk to them the way I talk to them. They are seen as elemental forces that are at the four corners, north, south, east, west. You only call upon them if you are dead effing serious about needing them for your spell. They are not, friendly, I guess. Like, you don't chat up a dragon. I'm like, I chat them up on the regular. So it's just interesting to me to see the way different spiritual cultures perceive the elementals. And I don't know if maybe there's room to do a class like that, or an offering like that.
Different views of this.
Fae. Yeah, it's the same thing for the Fae. Like there are witches that say you never talk to the Fae. They will trick you. They will, all this, terrible things that they'll do to you and stuff like this. And I'm like, I've only ever had delightful interactions with the Fae. So I think maybe you guys, your beliefs kind of become manifest in the
I
way
think
that
so.
you're treated, you know?
It's interesting that relates to, what is your lens, and what we were
Yeah.
talking about before with the big ass dragons and the Elohim, like purity of mind and heart, open to receive, and only then
Hmm.
does it come like full on. And if your
Right.
lens is like freaking the F out at what's
Yeah.
coming in, of
Yeah.
course,
Of course, that's how you're going to experience
do
it
not
if you
touch
experience it at all.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Because I could
that,
just as easily see that energy shutting it down.
right? That, I don't know. That's what it seems like to me.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's been interesting as well. And they're like, the way these people talk about fairies as if they're mini angels, that's not been the folklore and da 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 da. And I'm like, so we can't have evolved? So, like, fairies can't have evolved like we evolved?
Mm-hmm.
And then I've had conversations with this elf that I met in my parents' backyard. He was passing through and he knew that I could see him. And so we started talking, and that was an education because I didn't know that there was this huge rift between humans and elves around like human era, like 1100. Huge like betrayals on both sides, big mess, like fighting, nobody trusts each other anymore. And so it was interesting to see how far away he would be from me at first, and then over the years would come closer as he decided that I could be trusted,
Yep.
because I never pushed for a conversation. I never asked about the fighting, never, like, all of this is whatever you want it to be. I'm here. And so that's been interesting. Like, do I do a class on elves? Just it's almost like its own little universe, these elemental beings. It's like its
Yes.
own little universe with its own cultures and its own evolution. And I mean, fascinating
I
stuff.
definitely want to ask you about that. And that's a
So,
whole, if you have time, we can go
yeah,
into that stuff.
I'm all day. Yeah.
I want to be clear though. So I feel like what's coming up for you, just so whoever ends up watching this has some information that coming down the line, and they can probably find this information on rachelanneenergy.com. A course or class, perhaps it's 1-2 hour, or it's a class series about introduction to dragons, introduction to dragon energy from your perspective, from your point of view.
Yeah, the mastery of my experience, knowing that my experience is not the totality of experience.
For sure. But anybody who's resonating with how you're communicating about it, that would be ideal for them.
Right.
If they're having similar experiences, or perhaps are curious. They're just dragon curious.
Dragon curious. Got dragon?
Got dragon? That I'm really excited for that. I really want to take that course when you offer that. And in addition to that, to begin to dip your toe into the pool of offering dragon readings for one-on-one for individuals.
Yeah, and I mean, it's still on the table whether or not that's part of the intro. Like, I seem to remember Lauren doing a class where the first part of the class was, and I'm not offering this free, but she did like the first part of the class for everybody to join in, and then if you paid this other fee, then you were entitled to a reading after the class portion was over.
Yes.
So that was
one of her body of love or body of light classes, or it may have been her business. I can't remember, but yes, she has.
It's like that's a possibility. We could do it that way, and maybe
that's brilliant.
Maybe it's a 2-hour event, maybe it's a 2-night event. I don't know, but that's definitely a possibility because the Dragon Guide readings, I feel like that's probably, I need to take a step forward on that.
I love that. Brilliant. I love those two things. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
I feel like we've unpacked a lot of this elemental energy, and we've like just started. And so I I want to continue on. So I'm going to speak to the audience right now for just a moment and say, thank you, everybody that watched all or most of this, because it's been a phenomenal blast for me. And I believe for Rachel as well, about stuff that's really important to us in terms of our just a heartfelt sense of profundity with these topics of Elohim, Draconian, and all the way down to elemental energy. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please subscribe. We really want to go live and do something like this for Shiz Live at some point. That would be bananas. Absolutely bananas. So that's what we're headed for.
Love that.
A lot. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Rachel,
you.
for being willing
You,
to really
Christine.
share.
This was so much fun.
I love it. Thank you.
Oh, incredible.
Bye.